My right hand represents some discouraging piece of news. My left hand is my sadness. The sound is the dialectic. The sting is the need to push back. Consuming standard issue news is like any other form of consumption. Momentary satiety followed by mindless avoidance of all waste produced. Satiety, never clarity. Consuming news is to stay manacled on a decaying carousel in a toxic fog. It's only by pushing back do we gain clarity. Pushing back is the only way to disperse the fog, stop the carousel, and transform it to David's sling. This is the third in a series of shows called Pushback Storytelling. Start by identifying a current political or economic phenomenon, and then talk with a guest doing exactly the opposite and having success. The guest is negating the status quo. It's called storytelling to emphasize the personal, the local. Most of us can't affect national or international politics or macroeconomics, but we can meet with city council members or our county commissioners or legislators, and day to day, we can vote with our dollars. Pushback storytelling aims to provide a toolkit to those watching on how they can help bend the arc of history towards justice. When I was a kid, learning about the Civil War, my head kept cracking against this wall. How could anyone defend slavery? How could 600,000 Americans die answering that question? Living in 21st century America, I now have a small sense of what the 1850s must have been like. Intransigence, obstinacy, relentlessness, mulishness, everything intractable. Enter Bill Doherty, a professor at the U who's used therapy to aid marriages and families. Along with David Blankenhorn and David Lapp, they founded Better Angels. I'm wondering which metaphor you would use to describe what Better Angels does. What's your relationship with hyperpolarity? Are you pushing back?
Yes. We're pushing back against the kind of polarization that you described that was going on in the 1850s, the way in which we have turned one another into not just strangers, Americans who are strangers, but who are enemies. And it's interesting you referred to the 1850s because a lot of historians are saying that this is the most polarized time in America since the 1850s.
This series, Pushback Storytelling, is about people who move beyond good intentions and fruitless coffee-fueled spiels. It's about people who are crafting tools and are committed to sharing them. Would you tell me a little bit about the origins of the Fishbowl exercise?
Yeah, so we bring together what we call reds and blues, more conservative and more liberal, about 7 and 7. For either 3 hours or a full day of structured conversation.
7 and 7 meaning 7 people.
7 red, 7 blues.
Okay,
yep.
So we have 14 people and a moderator.
Yep, 2 moderators.
2 moderators.
And sometimes observers.
Okay.
And the goals are to try to understand each other beyond stereotypes and see if they can find some common ground. So the goal is not to convince somebody to change their mind. And so one of the exercises we do, one of the activities, is called a fishbowl, in which we flip a coin for who's going to go in the middle first. So you have 7 chairs in the middle and a moderator, and then there's a concentric circle, outer circle of chairs with the other group. So let's say we flip the coin and the reds are in the middle first, and the blues are in the circle outside. Now, when you're on the outside of the fishbowl, your job is to listen and learn something about this other group, about how they see things, how they experience the world. Okay?
Now, are the rules that the people on the outside listening, they can't say anything or ask any questions at this point?
Exactly. They cannot participate verbally or non-verbally.
Okay.
Okay. And so in the middle, there are 2 questions that the moderator puts to the group in the middle. And the first question is, why are your side's values and policies good for the country? And this gives people a chance to articulate the best of who they are, what their values are, why they think being a conservative is good for this country. Okay? And they're basically in agreement with one another. So when you're on the outside, you're watching a group of people, you're listening, who are in basic agreement, although they have differences. Okay? And then the second question is, what are your reservations or concerns about your own side? So there we're inviting some humility. And again, people go around and they talk about this, and when you're on the outside of the fishbowl, you're just eavesdropping. And then after that, it takes about 20 minutes, then the groups flip. They switch, okay? So the inner group moves to the out, and the outer group moves to the in. And then afterwards, we gather around the full table, and the questions, the two-part question is, what did you learn about how the other side sees themselves, and did you see anything in common? What did you learn about how the other side sees themselves, and did you see anything in common? And that's all that you can talk about that, okay? You can't just say, I want to critique what they said, or I want to elaborate one of my side. So it's an exercise in deep listening and trying to see the others as they see themselves, not my portrait of them.
And if I'm watching this as an observer, am I seeing a combination of scowls and smiles as far as people disagree and as they are pleasantly surprised? How are people interacting as they switch from role to role and listening to talking?
Well, when they are around the table afterwards, again, the questions on the table that they're asked to respond to. What did you learn? Did anything in common? At that point, we're not getting scowls.
Okay.
We're getting people being thoughtful and reflective. See, the thing about the fishbowl is I'm listening to you talk about what's important to you, as well as what you see as the downsides of your side, without having to respond. We're not making eye contact, okay? So I can just let go of whether I'm going to smile or frown. I don't have to do any of that stuff, okay? I can just take it in. We hardly ever get a chance to hear a group of people who differ from us in a conversation among themselves. Almost by definition, if we're present, we're interacting.
And how did this originate? The fishbowl. How did this come about?
Well, that's an old group dynamics technique
Okay.
that I learned in graduate school and I've used in so many settings. I mean,
Okay.
like if you get a group of parents and teens together to talk about some issue, best way to do it is get the teens in the middle first, or the parents in the middle, and then switch. Because what happens in the middle of the circle, you forget you're being observed.
Yes.
You just like being on camera, okay? You forget that. So you are yourself, and the other group gets a chance to learn something different. So it's an old technique. And then when I designed the Better Angels workshops, I thought this is going to be valuable because it maximizes learning, minimizes reactivity.
Well, and part of that is, you just said, of people not looking at each other in the eye, except
Yes.
within the inner circle.
That's right.
So by avoiding in terms of behavior, that avoids the short circuit of automatically going to the walls go up,
Yes.
you're wrong, all the negative response.
That's right, and I'm not rehearsing my response to you. If you're saying why you think free market capitalism is the best thing for Americans because it's going to eventually lift the most people out of poverty, this would be a red point. For example, the best poverty program is a good job, and you are articulating that, then I'm taking that in without having to say, well, what about the abuses of capital? You know, if we're in a conversation, I'm more likely to, at some point, maybe even cut you off and say, what about the other side? Whereas if I have 20 minutes where I'm just listening, and the particular part of what we always do in Better Angels is we ask people to put their best arguments forward, and then we ask them to self-critique. And so when the groups nail that second question, when they nail the question about their reservations or concerns, the workshop comes to life, because you just said it for me. So I'm thinking about a young man in one of our local workshops who expressed a tremendous idealism about the fact that free market capitalism has lifted more people out of absolute poverty in the world in the last 20 years than had happened in world history. And he's right about that. People get their cell phones and they can do micro lending and they can be entrepreneurial. And so he was quite idealistic about that. And then in the question about reservations or concerns, he said, you know, as much as I said how great this system is, there's a lot of people who are left out for years. You know, if the rising tide lifts all boats, not right away. Right. And my side, he said, I don't think we are do enough and are concerned enough about the people who are left behind while this is happening. Well, if you're a blue and you hear a red say that, you go, my man.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So now some bridges are being formed. Now, one of the things that intrigues me about this is, to what extent are people self-filtering? Meaning, to what extent people walk through the door are unique from the general population, in that they're more open to having their beliefs being self-critical about them in a public setting. In other words, what I'm trying to get at is, are these people exemplars, or are they outliers, the people who are participating in these workshops?
Yeah, I think they are not the extremes. They're not the far left and the far right. I mean, they're not the people who don't want anything to do with anybody else on the other side. They are concerned about the country and the polarization. However, and we've done 400 of these around the country, there are a lot of pretty polarized people. In fact, I mean, we've had local Tea Party chairs. Once we had, in one of our first workshops, we had Trump's campaign manager in a swing state. Okay. The campaign was over. So we have some people come in the door angry, okay, about the other side. But they're willing to be there. But they're not all purple. They're not all like, oh, let's all kumbaya. And they come nervous a lot of times. The thing I've learned, though, absent just the most extreme, the people who just really hate one another, hate the other side, it's the structure. If you set up a structure and a process that brings out people's better angels, and then you gently stop them when they veer from that process, and this is all part of the ground rules, then for the most part, people will be willing to be self-critical.
But one of the things in so many human affairs is answering the question, where the hell do I start?
Yeah.
And that strikes me as one of the most invaluable services that Better Angels offers, because you say, start here and do this and do this and do this. And what, how do I want to say this? Do you condition expectations as far as at the get-go, letting people know you can expect to start here and end here? Or do you leave it completely open-ended, just say, we're providing structure, that's the key thing that you do?
Yeah, and goals.
And goals.
Yeah.
And
then we just walk people through it. And
generally speaking, the structure works well enough that people can feel that I'm not yelling, I'm listening, and I'm getting insight. All these benefits I can feel in real time, and that gives me the strength to take the next step.
Yes.
So at the end, can you describe so you've got 16 people. Can you describe the shift of, say, feeling at the initial moment of the convening and the feeling in the room when you're all done?
Yeah, at the beginning it's nervousness. It's wondering if fights are going to break out, if people are just going to filibuster. And at the end, there is usually this sense, not that anybody's changed their mind about the issues, but they've changed their mind about the other side. people, they de-stereotype the other side. See, most of us see tremendous variation in our own political side. Okay, I mean, look at the 20 people running for Democrat.
Right.
Tremendous variation, and on the Republican side too, you got your libertarians and your social conservatives and your big, all that. We see tremendous variation on our own side, and we tend to stereotype the other side. And so when you see these folks don't represent, they're not just sort of cookie cutter. They differ among themselves, and they can be self-critical. What happens is people change their mind about each other, okay, about people on the other side. They humanize them and don't see them as caricatures.
So that's the key, is that what you're striving to do is provide the occasion for people to stop seeing a political opponent and start seeing a human being, just like me, with different views.
Yes.
And once people get to that point, then they can begin to have more nuanced, substantive conversations in the political sphere and possibly search for common ground. But all those things need to happen before the common ground is sought out.
Yeah, a lot of times what people realize is that in terms of core values and goals, what people want for the country, we're not as different as we thought. Everybody wants all of our children to be well educated. Everybody wants people to have access to good health care. Everybody wants safe communities. And everyone acknowledges that government has some role in those. We differ a lot on how much role the government has.
Exactly.
So we differ more on means than ends. That's a key learning that people have.
What I'd like to do now is one of the most remarkable tools that I have come across that you folks have created is degrees of personal polarization. I'm wondering if you could just walk us through this graphic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is a look inside, okay? So we've been talking about how groups of people are polarized, but this is how do I think and how do I feel about the bulk of people on the other side. So not how do I feel about President Trump or Nancy Pelosi, but how do I feel about the tens of millions of people who identify with a different political orientation than I do. And so it's a continuum, and it goes from hatred to respect and appreciation. So the hatred is they're enemies. They want to do harm to the country, and that's, of course, that's an attitude that is deeply corrosive, deeply corrosive. The next one is a disdain. So what I think of them is that they're ignorant and they should know better. Okay, this is the deplorables thing. Okay, it's their fault. Okay, and so I don't hate them. I don't want to wipe them off the face of the earth, but I have contempt for them. And again, I'm talking about tens of millions of my fellow Americans. Okay, and then the next one is pity. The core emotion is pity. And this is they're well-meaning, they've been duped, okay? And this is the book about what's wrong with Kansas, okay? That the people, for some reason, people on the other side, they don't know what's good for them. And they've been fooled by these politicians. So if you were at disdain and you moved to pity, you feel like you've made great progress. Okay.
Yes.
But but you can just see I'm smarter, I'm better. Okay. And then the next one is basic respect. Okay. That they do make some valid points. Although their overall perspective is flawed. So okay, they're in the system. I have basic respect for there's some smart people in that group. And then the last one is respect and appreciation. So here I am willing to say that the other side, so if you're a blue, that Reds have an important perspective. I don't agree with it all, but it's a necessary and important part of our political system. They have a lot to contribute. So hatred, disdain, pity, basic respect, and respect and appreciation. So we have a workshop in which we call Depolarizing Within. It's for individuals. And part of what people do is a self-assessment about where they are on this continuum and where they'd like to be.
And would you say that, generally speaking, that the people who attend a workshop are closer, that they're shading more towards the right side? In other words, they're not devoid of respect. There has to be some shred of respect to even begin. So that it would be rare to find somebody who started with hatred and an hour later.
No, hatred
shifted.
for sure. The haters don't come.
Yes, that's.
But we have people with disdain and pity who come.
Okay.
But they are worried about the country. The reason why people come, they're worried about the country.
And that's their transcendent motivation.
Yes.
That they're not finding any other tools out there that are providing a meaningful way forward.
Yes.
And that's where Better Angels steps in.
Yes.
I invited Bill on because I believe the work Better Angels is doing is crucial and noble. However, my political foes seek all the opposite that I do. They seek to have the state control a woman's reproductive life. They drive cars with bumper stickers proclaiming the only good Gaia is a dead one. Their Second Amendment God requires daily blood sacrifice. We have no Walter Cronkite to throw his arms around our shoulders every evening. For many citizens, their political ultimate concern is social justice. For equally many, hierarchy is sacred, created by God. What's the best case? America isn't dead, it just smells funny. For me, it's time for a divorce. I want to create two virtual countries that can coexist on one landmass. From a Better Angels point of view, what am I missing?
Well, what you're missing is that it's not possible for us to live in harmony as two different people on the same landmass. That divorce is not possible. One of the most important things I've ever heard at a Better Angels Red Blue workshop was shared by a Red at a workshop in Roseville last summer. And he said, neither side is going to vanquish the other. And so we're going to have to figure out how to get along and run the country together. And that's my response, that we are not going to divide the Mississippi River in the east and west, that we, like it or not, we share a history, we share a future, and I'm not going to give up on building that future together.
Here's what I hope. Right now, we have evolved into a situation that 24/7, throughout the entire year, day after day, all we have is one political campaign. We no longer have governance, we just have political campaigning. And each side believes if we just get one additional vote, we'll be in power, and then we can control everything, and heaven will be ushered in. But here's what I hope, that we'll begin to see a shift, that from 24/7 of eternal campaigning to that all the things that Better Angels does begins to take over the conversation. And now I see an evening, not only a special, but a series where people are showing in real time, this is how you can do this. So that's what I hope. Any feeling at all for how long that would take in terms of years to watch that shift?
Well, it's going to be gradual, but it's beginning. I did Better Angel Skills workshops for 25 Minnesota state legislators in the last 6 months. And when I asked them why they came, they said when they were out campaigning, the biggest issue they heard was stop the divisiveness and start getting something done. So the change is beginning.
So one possibility is to have a Better Angels person be a part of the campaign.
There you go.
Let's see, so nuts and bolts. Do you have any workshops coming up in the next few weeks that people should be aware of?
Yes, so people can go to our website, better-angels.org, and go to Minnesota. We have a state coordinator. We're all volunteers on this. and there's a list of local workshops. So there are red-blue workshops coming up regularly. There are skills workshops. There is this depolarization within workshop. Various libraries, Ramsey County Library sponsoring, Dakota County Library. And so better-angels.org, people can find out what's going on. We're also a membership organization, costs $12 a year. So if they can become a member, they can get on the email list and find out the things that are happening. And Minnesota is a hub. I think we have more Better Angels activity and members occurring in Minnesota than any other state.
Well, on that note, Professor Doherty, thank you for being my guest on today's forum. You can post comments, questions, suggest topics or guests for future shows on the Affirming Flame Facebook page. That's the Affirming Flame. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll check out Better Angels' website and consider participating in a session. I'm Kel Heyl.